LaNorris Sellers turns down $8 million to play at another school. Talk about that. And who was it that offered him? Locked on Gamecock starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. Hope everyone is having a fantastic Wednesday morning. As you are hearing this, we got a good show for you today. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to everyone making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode brought to you by our friends at, drumroll please, Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, all capital letters, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So today's episode, we're going to be a little bit all over the place and talking a bunch of different topics, all about South Carolina, some about football. We'll touch a little bit on baseball, but the big news that we're going to start with right out of the gates is the story that came out of the Athletic and the New York Times yesterday. I touched on it at the end of yesterday's episode and talked about it at the very last segment, so make sure you go back and check that out from Monday's episode. But the rumor is, and it is confirmed by LaNorris Sellers' dad, so I think it's pretty accurate. LaNorris Sellers was offered $8 million in the transfer portal by another school in what I believe was during the December window, okay? The question really isn't whether or not it's true. It's the main intriguing question, I feel like, at this point is who was the one that offered him? I've got several different ideas of who it is. I'm going to tell you which ones make the most sense to me and who I think it was. This is all speculation. I do not have the facts on that. Maybe that at some point that'll come out. But Sellers being shopped in the portal or being targeted in the portal from other schools is something I said very early in December was going to happen. You do not have a kid that's that athletic, that good, and that played this well with such a high ceiling in this conference, not get at least some people that were going to come after him. I think that when we touched on that during the episode in December, maybe people were a little bit defensive or worried that it meant he was going to leave, which was never the case, never going to be the case, in my opinion, for all the reasons we're going to talk about today, and that all the reasons his dad also brought up in the interview. But yeah, of course, that position, which is the most important position in all sports, when you have arguably the guy that played that position the best towards the end of the season, why would he not have several suitors coming after him? And you think about it also, the other reason I feel like it's very true is this is a window and a span of a couple of windows where we knew with the upcoming house settlements and the end of what was mainly the fiscal year for a lot of different teams, there was going to be a surplus of money and a surplus to spend from a lot of teams around the country. All of those things combined, and again, primarily because of how talented he is, those are the reasons why they came after him. Not because he wanted to leave, not because he wasn't happy with what's going on with him at South Carolina. His dad even touched on that. He is very happy with what he has in place and the NIL deal he has in place, and he's happy on and off the field here in Columbia. But who would have been the one to come after him? In my opinion, I don't think it's as salacious as we would want it to be. I think it's Duke. And the three ideas that popped most into my head about who it could be was Duke, Miami, and then the other one would be a team like UCLA or a team like, I don't think it was UCLA necessarily, but I mean a team like that in the West Coast or west of Texas or north of Mason-Dixon line that is not from this conference, and probably one that has decent money to spend. I thought at first maybe Oregon, but Oregon went out and got Dante Moore, former five-star. They feel good about him. There were so many moving pieces in the portal this year. It's hard to know exactly who wanted it. But Miami and Duke are the two that make the most sense, in my opinion. Duke especially, but I'll start with Miami. Miami has shown already they will spend upwards of $4 million in the portal. Now, the biggest thing this was contingent on, by the way, I thought this was very interesting. It was not a, hey, we'll give you $8 million for 2 years and we'll give you 4 per year, right? Like a normal contract. And if you end up going pro, like you're projected to be an early first round pick, if you leave school, well, then we'll just eat the other 4, like you will just guarantee the first part of the contract or the deal. The deal was he had to play for 2 years, and stay in school for 2 years to get the contract. It's still a very good deal. It's a really good deal. And it's a hard one to turn down, if we're being honest, because even if you get to the NFL and say he's not a first round pick, that $8 million is really, really good, and probably more than he would end up making if he's not a slotted early top of the first round type of pick. Still $2.7 million that he's getting at USC at South Carolina is not anything to shake a stick at, but I do think $8 million is a lot to turn down because it's one of the highest numbers we've seen. Miami has done this before. They did it with Carson Beck, and they clearly are a team that is going to shop in the portal whenever the portal is open. But the reason why I think it's Duke has put a emphasis on their football program a little bit more than they used to over the last decade or so. They are going into a year with a new head coach. Manny Diaz is back as a head coach, former Miami coach, former Penn State defensive coordinator. Guy's been all over the place. I think he was at Mississippi State at one point, but he's the head coach. We all know Duke has a lot of money from their boosters. We have not seen them spend a ton in the portal until this offseason. And Darren Mintz is a kid that, I think his name is Darren. Let's look it up real quick so we make sure we know who we're talking about. Mensah, the kid from Tulane. Yeah, Darian Mensah, the quarterback from Tulane. He was a huge storyline in the portal window because not a lot of people had expected him to get a huge deal, maybe end up somewhere like a Power 4 program, but not a huge deal. And he got 2 years, $8 million from Duke. It would have hurt really badly if he decided to leave. It wasn't like a rival trying to poach him or anything like that. So at least it wasn't anything that would have been as, I hate to use this word, but like emotionally difficult to get over. And again, it didn't happen anyway. But Duke coming in and trying to poach big players with a huge, huge offer, that is maybe the best example of what college football is becoming. Not a traditional power, not a former blue blood, not a team that's probably going to even be in contention this upcoming season. Duke is willing to spend $8 million to secure a quarterback in the portal before next season. I mean, I think that alone speaks volumes of where we're at in this college football era, right? And the other big part of this too, guys, is that like more than anything, this is a good thing for the program. You've got guys that are not only being offered like one of the highest NIL packages in the history of the sport, but you're also getting it from people that are staying because of the culture and wanting to play here for you at South Carolina. And I understand it turned down Duke, but like, I don't think it would have mattered if it would have come from a bigger school. I think the fact that it was Duke probably made it a little bit easier. But when you're able to bring in a kid that a lot of people overlooked when he was coming out of high school, hometown kid that wants to be here, that says volumes about what Shane Beamer has built here at South Carolina. Now, when we come back, I'm going to tell you exactly what was said, the quotes from the article, and then the other most important part of this too, which is moving forward. Is what South Carolina did in December of last year when they worked out all of their deals during the season, is that going to be the process we see from every school moving forward, considering how well it worked? Before we go to commercial, do want to tell you real quickly about our friends at Monarch Money. Listen, do you ever check your bank account and just sit there and wonder to yourself, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it is easy and easier than ever to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in for you. It's your personal CFO, and it gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Listen, Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app like a lot of others you've seen. It's a complete financial command center. And what that means for you is that it can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can just stop managing your money and start building wealth instead. It's simple and easy. And like I tell you guys all the time, when I first started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and I save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege, all capital letters, all one word, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. We'll be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks right after this. All right, back at it. And let's continue talking a little bit about this situation with LaNorris Sellers and exactly what was said. This is the quote from LaNorris Sellers' dad, okay? Norris, he said, he was offered all kinds of crazy numbers. I told him he could say, I'm going to stay or I'm going to go, but my 2 cents, it was to get into college on a scholarship, play ball, get our degree, and go on about our business. This NIL deal came later. We did not come here to make money. We came here to get our education, play ball, and with schools calling, we're not going to jump ship just because they're offering more than what we're getting. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. There you go. Sellers father also acknowledged that the NIL offers can be tough to turn down, but there was never an indication that he would leave the Gamecocks. He said, you're 19. You don't need $8 million. You're in a great spot. There were several talks, but it never really crossed his mind to leave. It's a challenge with colleges offering younger players that kind of money. Who's going to say no to $8 million for 2 years? They're going to be swayed if you don't have the right people in your corner. This is another part, and I think this is the most interesting part of how it kind of factors who he is in general and the kind of player he can be in this upcoming season and the rest of his career at South Carolina. I said this yesterday on the show. I feel like this kind of situation and this story, it makes him one of the most special players in the history of this program. I know we all love Connor Shaw. Connor Shaw is romanticized about how incredible of a starter he was at South Carolina for his time here. Never lost at home. He was a part of the run that was the greatest 3 years in the history of the program. Connor Shaw was awesome. He probably is still the greatest quarterback to ever play at this school. And I don't know if Sellers will pass that. Physically and talented, obviously, or talent-wise, he's better than Shaw. But from what he meant to this university, and that's important nowadays. Because it's something that's getting lost around this sport. And when that goes away, part of the charm of this sport goes away, and fans really don't want to be a part of it anymore. And the fact that you have a guy that is from right up the road in Florence, and he was offered all this. I mean, again, this is not just a lot of money. It's the biggest, or it's one of the biggest NIL deals in the history of the sport, besides the Bryce Underwood one that he got at Michigan, which was $12 million. But it's one of the biggest in the history of the sport. To be able to turn that down and say, no, I'm going to stay here, when we all saw his struggles early on. We saw how much, Beamer was recruiting with him. He also lost his offensive coordinator. Lost several stars in the offensive line, lost 3 guys in the middle there, lost a ton of talent on defense. I mean, who's to say that he wouldn't go somewhere else where he could make 3 times what he's making here? And on top of that, if he's already looking and interested in somewhere else, go somewhere else, and maybe where he thinks he might have a better chance at winning a title. That's what Juice Wells did. LaNorris Sellers isn't Juice Wells. And I think the last part of what his dad said, where he said, when you have good people in your corner, that stood out to me more than anything else in this entire situation. Because so many times nowadays, you don't have, like these athletes don't have the right people in their corner. Look at the Nico Malieva situation at Tennessee. You want to look at that from any standpoint, whether it was like doing the right thing, handling it the right way, or even just from a dollars and cents standpoint, he lost at every single turn there. Carson Beck left Georgia, where he'd been for 4 years and was one of the better starters in the country going into last season, had a lot of struggles last year, and was going to originally enter the draft. He decided to go to Miami, partially probably because of his girlfriend, but also because they gave him $4 million. We see people duck and run immediately all the time. All the time. You know, the kid at UNLV last year, the freshman who had, just as many started just as many games as LaNorris Sellers at the start of the year last year, and decided, well, you know what? If I don't get paid this amount, I'm going to hold out for the entire year and wait until I get the right deal for me, and left. The fact that LaNorris Sellers in this day and age didn't do that is still a big deal. And the fact that he has that many good people in his corner, in his ear, telling him the right way to go about business, not just the fact, like, not just how he handles himself or what he's doing to his teammates, but how to handle himself in the business side of this before he gets to the NFL, huge. And it'll pay dividends in the long run, like for all parties involved, really. But obviously, LaNorris Sellers is going to stay a Gamecock. And moving forward into this season, now he's in a situation where what I really love about this is he now becomes one of the most praised and applauded quarterbacks, I think, nationally from multiple fan bases as a fan favorite in this sport at that position for the upcoming season. Like, we talk about Diego Pavia all the time about how many fans that aren't Vandy fans obviously love him and how great he's been for college football and the SEC and the upset of Bama and all that kind of stuff last year. And we're going to talk about him some more a little bit later. But South Carolina has always been a school that feels like people outside of South Carolina want to cheer for it. Outside of the SEC want to cheer for it. And Sellers, I feel like, just endeared himself into, to college football fans all over the country, especially because of everything that's happening around the sport. So every single way you look at this, I thought South Carolina handled it extremely well. They handled it well from a standpoint of getting out ahead of the curve and trying to make sure you got him the deal he deserves and the deal that was going to make him, keep him in South Carolina. And then the other part of it too, everything that was handled from his side of whether it was his family, his agents, or his team, that was handled well, as extremely well from them, and a very, very mature decision in general, but a mature and smart decision financially as well. I want to touch on one last thing about this. Moving forward, when you talk about what he will be presented with and saying when it comes to this question and this topic moving forward, because it's going to be talked about a lot. Think about when he sits down with an NFL front office and coach and staff during the combine or the pre-draft process or anything like that. He is automatically going to be looked at as a high character guy that you do not have to worry about whatsoever. And that's a really big deal, I think, this day and age. You won't see rumors. You won't see, at the very least, any sort of those like smoke screens you see that are thrown out there from other teams about quarterbacks. You've seen it happen all, like the Jalen Carter thing right before he was drafted in the top 10 by the Eagles. Like, it happens all the time. Lies that are made up, like little like rumors that are kind of leaked out to different either scouts, analysts, media, whatever. You don't have to worry about that at all. Now all this kid has to do is show up, go play, and show everyone why he deserves to be a top 5, top 10 pick. Like, all the other parts of it, like that side of the sport, the financial stuff, this part of his future, he's got to worry about maybe where he's going to get drafted if he doesn't play well. But everything else, the hay's already in the barn. And that's huge. When we come back, we are going to briefly talk about the ESPN future program rankings and where South Carolina ranked in those, as well as Diego Pavia, Vandy's quarterback, who sat down in a interview with, it used to be Barstool, but Bustin' with the Boys, and had some very interesting things, not only to say about the Big Ten, but about South Carolina specifically. We'll talk about it when we come back. All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back into the final part of today's show. And we're talking about an interesting ranking and power ranking from ESPN that I have never seen until this offseason. And it is the future program power rankings of all, I think it was every single, like all 68 Power 4 programs. They ranked 1 through 68. South Carolina comes in at 18. There's a couple of teams on here and programs that I look at and kind of wonder why they would be ahead of South Carolina. I think they're right behind Illinois, and a couple others we'll get to in a second. This is what this is based off of. Returning quarterback, right? It's basically looking at where each team stacks, right? in the 3-year projections of the sport. And again, it's every single Power 4 program in the country that they ranked. So looking at it, you have a total of, let me see here, all 16 SEC teams ranked around the top 50. You also had Texas at number 1 overall. The evaluations were based on the following categories: returning quarterback, likelihood of a multi-year quarterback on the roster, offensive line and defensive line outlook, roster management, star power, and then coaching staff. So those 6 things are what dictated who was where. South Carolina, like I said, 18. You're 8th in the SEC. Texas was 1st. Georgia was 3rd. LSU was 8. Then Tennessee, 9. Alabama, 10. I believe you had Florida was at 13 or something like that, a little bit ahead of USC. And then Ole Miss was at 16 as well. Still, they were not previously ranked the last time they made these rankings. This is what it said from ESPN and their evaluation of where they were put in these specific rankings. Okay, returning quarterbacks. Yes, obviously LaNorris Sellers is back after a breakout season when he passed for over 2,500 yards, had 25 touchdowns. Blah blah. We all know that. Likelihood of a multi-year quarterback. Says everything hinges on Sellers' development. Sellers is just a redshirt sophomore and has the size and skills to play in the NFL. But he's not there yet and must significantly cut down on turnovers to solidify himself as a top prospect. If Sellers departs in 2026, South Carolina could turn to Aaron Nolan, who was the number 52 overall ranked recruit in the 2024 class. There we go. Offensive line, defensive line outlook. This part kind of sucks because I thought about this. For one, you just lost a ton of veteran experience at this position. But also, even if you were returning it, I don't know if ESPN, like, look at how they graded this team going into last year. Just because you had Kyle Kennard doesn't mean that anybody knew who Kyle Kennard was or was going to give South Carolina credit for having a potential All-American in him. But this is what it says. South Carolina lost a lot on the defensive front with Kyle Kennard, the SEC Defensive Player of the Year, moving along with Tonka Hemingway and TJ Sanders. The group has a multi-year centerpiece in Dylan Stewart, who opened his freshman season with 6.5 sacks, 10.5 tackles for loss, and 3 forced fumbles. South Carolina also has some return needs and transfer options at tackle, but will need multiple players to take on bigger roles. I think all that's fair. I think we all know that that's the case. Now, the interesting part here is they will need multiple players to take on bigger roles. That includes Nick Barrett and junior college transfer Xavion Hardy. The Gamecocks will look to build the other edge rush spots around Brian Thomas Jr. At end to bookend with Dylan Stewart. Thought that was interesting because that's not necessarily the only name that we've heard leading for that. So then you also talk about the fact that they have 2 non-seniors at tackle, which is Isaiah Thompson and Casey Henry. Their interior line will be completely different, but they have a lot of veteran experience at that position. Roster management. The Gamecocks knew they would be losing a lot to the NFL. That is why you saw them go out and make tons of splash in the portal. Their goal is to keep their non-seniors, which they did. You also had Sellers, Stewart, quarterbacks Jalen Kilgore. Let's see here. Jalen Kilgore, Judge Collier, and then young receivers Mazeo Bennett and Nick Harbor all coming back. Why is that a big deal? Well, they lost some scholarship players to the portal, but not any key contributors. The team added a lot of much-needed transfers, including Brandon Siss, and then look at Utah State running back Russell Faison as well. They had multiple top 20 classes in recruiting and also one of the best portal classes, as well as some of the best portal development over the last several years. Finally, star power. South Carolina has a national awards candidate on each side of the ball with Sellers and Stewart. The question is who joins them. They're early favorites. Someone in the secondary with Kilgore, who had a team. What do you call it? Jalen Kilgore, who led the team with 5 interceptions just a season ago. Finally, coaching staff. Beamer rebounded from a tough 2023 season to win 9 games and nearly reach the CFP last season. Now he has to figure out how he can reload and sustain after so many NFL departures. They elevated former Alabama head coach Mike Shula as OC. Defensive coordinator Clayton White is back for his 5th season, and the rest of the staff is intact. That last sentence is one of the least celebrated and talked about things about this entire team and program going into the season. The continuity you're having year over year with your coaching staff staying in place with Beamer, especially defensively, is huge. I mean, your only real loss was Dowell Loggins as the OC. And yes, that's a big loss because he was great the second half of the year. Keep in mind, he was not the first half of the year. And there were a lot of people, including myself, that were very frustrated with whether or not he'd be coming back if things didn't change, which they did. But everyone else is coming back. That's massive. That's massive. So looking at going into the future of the program, I think the other big part that they have not celebrated enough is that whole thing about the multi-year starters and the multi-year players at quarterback. I don't think Sellers is here next year, but I think you've got some guys behind him, including maybe the one you're bringing in with Landon Duckworth, that could easily fit that role. So we are a little bit longer than normal tonight. I appreciate you guys listening in. But we will be back tomorrow. We'll talk about the Diego Pavia quote and why he said the biggest game on Vandy's schedule was week 3 against South Carolina. Appreciate you guys listening. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Until then, go Cox.